to continue our Human Rights Day focus, we are joined by Sabelo Mbokazi, who is the head of migration in the Social Affairs Department at the African Union. A very good morning to you, Mr. Mbokazi, and thank you so much for your time. So, obviously, migration is something that is, it's affected by political matters, economic matters. South Africa has now just signed this agreement with the United Nations Refugee Agency. Is this cause for positivity, at least for our fellow African brothers and sisters, that things will be handled better?
Thank you very much, Marumo, and thanks to eNCA for inviting the African Union to provide an opinion on this very important day, the Human Rights Day in South Africa. Yes, indeed, I think I would concur with you with your observation that this is indeed a step forward because the concerned persons and the concerned people, refugees and migrants, even if sometimes the migrants are irregular, but they still have that opportunity to be accorded to human rights.
Now, just a story that a colleague of mine, Aisha Ismail, had just been doing with interviews with a number of refugees. There were concerns that money that's been given for this effort by the UN HRC and, of course, to the Home Affairs Department is not going to be used for what it's supposed to be. It's felt that why is it being given to the Minister Aaron Motsoaledi, because there's been seemingly proof that money just gets misused in this country. So how then do you allay the fears of refugees and migrants that this will be done right?
On this day of the human rights, we would not really venture into commenting how the resources will be used, because the UNHCR and South Africa, they have done that bilaterally without involvement of African Union Commission. But what we can say is that on this day of human rights, it will be important to recall and to remind all and sundry that whether it's the refugees, whether it's the migrants, we have policies in Africa and policies that are important for the respect, the promotion, and the protection of the human rights for all concerned persons, including the refugees. So that's what I think we will indicate here, because we are talking about the universal human rights.
Yeah.
So whether the resources, how the resources will then be utilized to make their lives easy, it will then be important. I think everyone carries that responsibility. We've
seen human rights matters in Mozambique. We've seen them in the Tigray region of Ethiopia. We've seen, of course, right here in South Africa, xenophobia. Is the African Union confident that enough is being done by all states, all governments on this continent to ensure that human rights violations don't continue to be trampled upon and violated the way they've been?
Maybe what we can talk about in response to your question is the architecture of the African Union for human rights in relation to the refugees, in relation to the migrants. You may be aware that the African Union has an institution, fully fledged institution, that focuses on human rights, which is named as the African Commission for the Human and People's Rights, that is based in Banjul. So African Union has put in place institutions, but over and above, they are instruments and frameworks that focuses specifically that speaks to human rights, because for the African Union, it is important that there should be, at all material times, respect, promotion, and protection of human rights. You might have heard about the Agenda 2063, which is the vision for the African Union. Even this vision carries an aspiration, and this aspiration indicates that Africa should advance good governance, respect of human rights, justice, and the rule of law. So I would say that African Union has put in place architecture for the protection of people of concern, but also there are frameworks that speaks to that.
Can the ordinary refugee, the ordinary migrant, the ordinary asylum seeker take confidence in this vision, in these instruments, in this architect that has been put in place, that it will actually work, and the effectiveness of it?
Because of the efforts that we are even now putting in place regarding the combating of violation of human rights for the people of concern, that is the refugees, even the internally displaced persons and migrants, and sometimes the labor migrants, we are confident that the work that we are doing with all the 55 member states in terms of improving the governance and the migration and refugee governance and providing capacity development for the institutional arrangement, we are confident that these instruments and policies are beginning to trickle down at a national level, but they're also being incorporated at the development plans of each and every country.
Yeah.
So we have confidence that there is an uptake of these continental instruments at a national level.
Mr. Mbokazi, thank you so much for your time this morning here on All Angles at eNCA. That is the Head of Migration in the Social Affairs Department at the African Union, Sabelo Mbokazi. Now